Hi, Maddie. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on.
Yay. We're going to have so much fun talking about paleo lifestyle and chronic disease. But before we jump right into all of that, I'd love for you to tell our listeners about your fascinating story because it's so impactful for your journey.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, my health journey kind of started, throughout my entire life, I had been an athlete. I was a soccer player. I was always really active, pretty healthy. I had three other sisters, and I was kind of the one who always got sick a little bit more often. For example, this is just one small example. One time we were all in a hot tub together that wasn't so clean. Nobody else got sick, but I got a crazy bacterial infection and was almost airlifted to the hospital because my body just couldn't
Whoa.
handle the introduction to that bacteria. But everybody else, our cousins and friends, were all fine.
Mm.
So I think I always had some underlying immune deficiencies, but there was never anything on paper. And I was always known as like a super energetic, active little kid. And I just played a bunch of soccer and all kinds of sports. And um, seemed fine for the most part. So, long story short, I grew up on Bainbridge Island, a ferry ride across from the city of Seattle. And as you know, Seattle rains a lot.
Just
And
a little.
just a little. I was so sick of it. And I was getting recruited to play soccer that I ended up finding a school as far away as possible. And I went down to Florida. So
Sun.
across the country. Yes. And I was just ready for the sun. So when I was 18, I went down to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida to play soccer and go to school.
Hmm.
And the end of my freshman year is kind of like when it all started.
Mm.
So I was playing Division II soccer my entire freshman year. I was doing the freshman party stuff where I didn't really go out that much in high school. And I was always an athlete. So I was taking pretty good care of my body, but I was taking all new kinds of classes, partying a little bit, playing a bunch of soccer, 2-a-day practices, waking up at 5 a.m. to
Wow.
do sprints out on the field and just kind of like running my body into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so freshman year finals week is when it all started, which like seems like the perfect storm to the end of like
Right.
kind of a crazy year. So I was freshman year finals week, obviously pretty stressed. I was having some issues with constipation and pain in my lower right quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of, I think, 5 or 6 days, it just kept getting worse and worse.
Mm.
And then one night I was laying in my little dorm bed and it was like, okay, something's wrong. It's getting worse. I'm getting a fever. There's a lot of pain. And it felt like appendicitis.
Mm.
So at that point, we went to one of my little college roomies took me to the ER and they put me in thinking it might be appendicitis, but we did a CT scan and it ended up being terminal ileitis. So I had
Mm.
inflammation in my small intestine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 18, well, 19 at that point, the end of my freshman year. And it was just kind of like, okay, so why is this happening? What is this from? And
Mm-hmm.
their initial thought was, and I have this on all my paperwork from that hospitalization, was possible Crohn's question mark.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you think about it, it was like 5 days prior, or maybe 7 days prior, I was fine. And then I started getting some pain, constipation, a fever, and then it all just happened really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was quite a shock to myself, my family, who was 3,000 miles away across the
Mm.
country. And that was kind of like the light switch that turned on the rest of my chronic issues that have pretty much worked through now, but it was like 9 straight years of trying to figure out what the heck
Wow.
is wrong with me. And it all
Mm.
started with that
Mm-hmm.
initial hospitalization and the terminal ileitis, that infection in my small intestine.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a journey.
Yeah. And so that was kind of, yeah, that was just the beginning of it all. And I can go into
Beginning.
the rest of the details because there's kind of a lot that happened after that, but we can
Mm-hmm.
take it however, in whichever direction you want to go.
Yeah, we'll dive in maybe as we'll sprinkle it in as
Yes.
we move through. Awesome. So it sounds like there was a huge shift in during that time period where you're like, okay, what's going on? Why is my body having this reaction? And you're so young, and that's a huge illness to have at such a young age. So it's probably like, okay, some light bulbs of thought were probably sparking in your brain, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was scary. And I didn't really know what Crohn's was. I didn't really know that many people. I'm like, fortunately, at that point, I didn't really know that many people, especially women, that were suffering from autoimmune disease. But
Hmm.
now it feels like almost everybody I talk to has chronic issues or chronic illness of some sort. So that was kind of the beginning of this entire journey of figuring out what was wrong with me. And it got worse at times after that.
Hmm.
And then also doing a lot of research to find out what's this all about. Why are so many young women, especially, getting diagnosed with
Hmm.
these chronic inflammatory autoimmune type diseases? And then
Mm.
there were a lot of wake up calls along the way in the following 9 years.
Yeah. Yes, it is so interesting how that particular population is really having a lot of autoimmune diseases. As a physician, I'm always curious about those types of things too. It's like, well, why am I seeing so many patients in this age group that are having such chronic illness? Because it's uncommon. So we're definitely seeing a shift, and why I think some of that is happening, we'll probably discuss more as we move along, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's so much to it.
I know, totally. So, okay, so we're going to be talking today about chronic disease and specifically about how paleo lifestyle helped you to have a huge shift in your own awareness and healing, which I myself follow paleo lifestyle, and it help is a huge difference for me. And when I'm not following as strictly, I immediately like can see different effects happen in my life. It slowly starts to trickle and then explode into a magnitude of different things, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly the same thing for me.
So let's talk about the paleo aspect itself, or just paleo, nutritional plan. So what it is, because I know a lot of listeners are like, what is paleo? It's like this mysterious word that was invented.
Yes. So I actually, just to go on a little bit of my background of how I got there, I
Oh yeah.
actually didn't set out to go on a paleo diet, but I stumbled upon it after
Mm.
I eliminated food group after food group after food group, because it started with that inflammation in my small intestine. And
Hmm.
after that hospitalization, I was never the same. I could not eat the same food anymore. I had
Mm.
chronic GI issues to where I could barely make it to the bathroom. I had severe pain. I was on steroids and antibiotics, and I took so much ibuprofen, which was not great. And just there was so much to figuring out what was wrong with my GI tract, what happened to my digestion, what can I eat, what's good for me, what's
Hmm.
bad for me. So it kind of started with eliminating gluten, because that was the obvious one.
Right. Super trigger.
Yes. And then we went to, I think, dairy, and then sugar for inflammation, and then to
Hmm.
from gluten to all grains instead of
Hmm.
just being gluten specific. And then legumes and soy and processed food. And I just ended up feeling my best on a paleo approach, which I was
Hmm.
actually really excited to find a name for it, because when you're like, I don't
Right.
eat dairy, soy, sugar, grains, gluten, legumes, it's just really annoying and you can't
Mm.
really explain it. So when
Mhm.
I found that identifying with a paleo approach was really helpful for me, because it gave me structure, and it
Mhm.
also gave me an easy way to be like, okay, I like paleo dinner recipes. And it
Right.
was just like an easy way to target what I could handle at the time.
Mhm.
So that was kind of how I stumbled upon paleo. And then I ended up doing tons of research, and I was fascinated by how many people had healed through a paleo approach.
Mhm.
And a quick description on my part would just be an ancestral way of living and eating, how our
Mhm.
ancestors ate and how they lived. Obviously, we live in a crazy modern world that is very different,
Right.
but getting back to the roots of like, what did our ancestors eat, from like meat, fish, nuts, seeds, fowl, vegetables, fruits,
Mhm.
and like the core of what our ancestors ate. And
Right.
that's kind of how I eat now. I mean, I think that there's a lot of healthier, like quote unquote processed options now. Like there's a ton of awesome brands out there that follow a
Mhm.
paleo approach and
Right.
are whole 30 approved or whatever, but for the most part it's getting down to our roots and eating those whole real foods
Mhm.
that our ancestors ate.
Yeah, so that's a great explanation. And so, just to recap, the foods that the paleo lifestyle eliminates are grains, dairy, legumes, sugar. Now, not all paleo lifestyle eliminates 100%, and we can talk about that too, right? And then
Yes.
also, what about dairy and eggs?
Yes. So eggs, I don't consider dairy. So eggs seem to be fine for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Dairy depends on the person. I think dairy is really hard for a lot of people to digest.
Right.
But if you get back to the original form of dairy that we were consuming in its whole form, that would be organic, full fat dairy. And that is a healthier option for most people
Mm-hmm.
that's not stripped of all those healthy fats, and it doesn't have the hormones and the antibiotics and
Right.
all the other crap in it. And
Mm-hmm.
so if people can tolerate dairy, I think it depends on the person's situation, but an organic full fat dairy yogurt or raw milk or something along those lines seems to be the best option in terms of if you're including dairy in your diet.
Right. Okay, great. Um,
Yeah.
and so, okay, so we've defined kind of like paleo, which I think is wonderful for listeners who are experimenting in different things because there's a lot of, and we'll kind of talk about the differences between those. So let's go there. So,
Yeah.
what's the difference between like paleo and whole 30? And also keto. I think those are like the three that kind of target wellness in that specific realm of paleo.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Whole 30 and Paleo are very similar.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, if you really think about it, the only differences are for Whole 30. So there's a lot of like controversy around white potatoes versus sweet potatoes
Right.
and like processed paleo foods that
Hmm.
can be Whole 30 compliant or not Whole 30 compliant.
Right.
And then nut flours, and they're like they are processed, but it's basically just the whole nut ground down, or like blanched
Hmm.
almonds. And I think that there's a lot of, what would you say is the main difference between Whole 30 and Paleo, if there's like one thing that you could pinpoint? Because I do find
Right.
that it's pretty similar.
I think sugar is the biggest one, because Whole 30 eliminates like every single aspect of sugar, and I
Yeah.
think in paleo there, people will eat coconut sugar, I think is the main one that I see in a lot of recipes. And it,
Yeah.
it depends on your strictness level. Like if you're doing like an autoimmune paleo, right? Then you're like, okay,
Yes.
I need to remove more of those things that sugar that might be causing more inflammation in the gut or whatever.
Yes, that's a really good point. And so, yeah, on Paleo, a lot of people include raw honey, pure
Hmm.
maple syrup, coconut sugar, sometimes maple sugar,
Hmm.
stuff like that. And then on Whole 30, really dates in their whole form are pretty
Hmm.
much the only sweetener that you can use aside from fruit.
Right.
And then the other difference would be that some people include like a whole organic form of monk fruit or stevia
Oh, right. Yeah.
on Paleo.
Hmm.
So the sweetener thing, I think people get really intense about, because like everybody wants, we're all kind of addicted to sugar in one way or another,
Right.
or at least the taste of sweetness. And then like the way that we've all grown up around
Hmm.
so much sugar, most of us at least. So I think there's a lot of different opinions out there.
Hmm.
I think the biggest thing that benefits people the most is the least amount of sugar possible.
Right.
But there's room for healthier treats, in my opinion, because I find that restricting like crazy, unless you need to for a healing protocol, is
Hmm.
not necessarily sustainable. And that can trigger binging, restricting cycles that are
Right.
not healthy for most of us. So that's
Yeah.
kind of why I find that, and we can kind of get into that later, but
Hmm.
incorporating like quote unquote healthier treats with whole
Right.
food ingredients of like
Hmm.
maybe cookies and candies that we used to eat as kids, just healthifying those is a
Right.
good way to make a healthier paleo approach and
Mm.
lifestyle sustainable for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think when you have family members or partners, that you're trying to make meals for, it's nice to be able to have that little like special treat. So it's like, okay, we're going to be doing this different diet together, but here you go. Here's a little treat for you.
Yes. And I think a lot of it for my clients, especially, is like okay, we're not going to take everything away and you're not going to have to be on a boring, sad, pathetic diet because that's not what this is about. But
Mm-hmm.
let's make a lot of swaps. Let's replace before we
Mm-hmm.
remove. If you're eating cookies every day, let's reduce down to one cookie and let's make it healthier. Let's use real ingredients
Mm-hmm.
and take away the inflammatory processed ingredients and kind of like wean people off by using healthier options of some of their favorite foods. And
Mm-hmm.
then a lot of those can be there to stay, but maybe weaning them off like the portion sizes that they're having or the frequency of sugar that they're eating throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally find there's a time and a place, but then there are other people who are on a super dogmatic paleo or whole 30
Right.
approach that doesn't have room for those. But then the other part of Whole 30 is that Whole 30 was intended to be 30 days, whereas
Right.
paleo is more of a lifestyle shift.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people find a lifestyle shift through Whole 30. It just depends on how they take it and run with it.
Great. Yeah, that's a great explanation between those two. And then, so keto, what's the difference in kind of like the keto aspect? Because I think that one is like out of the three, that one's like the most, on the other side of the fence, so to speak.
Yes. So keto is different because it is focused on low carb and high fat.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to build, I mean, everybody has different goals from keto,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of it is to build metabolic flexibility so that you're
Mm-hmm.
not relying on burning carbohydrates for fuel, but you can also dip into ketosis and burn fat for fuel
Mm-hmm.
or burn ketones for fuel. So it's about changing the way that your body uses energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people get confused. A lot of people think it's like a short-term fad diet and it doesn't last, but I think it works differently for everybody. There are a lot of benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Building metabolic flexibility is really important, especially now in this world that we're living in with COVID and everything. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people could benefit with um, kind of mm, experimenting with
Mm-hmm.
lower carb than they've
Mm-hmm.
been used to because the carbohydrate content that we have been programmed
Ingrained, yeah,
and
programmed, yeah.
ingrained to eat is just in
Crazy high.
way crazy high, and it's
Mhm.
not doing us any favors. So to break it down, keto is just low carb, high fat, and there's a lot of different variations in there.
Right. Yeah.
But metabolic flexibility is one of the biggest things that you can gain out of that. And
Mhm.
the difference between keto and paleo is like you can eat really high carb on paleo if
Mhm.
you're just looking at like what are the approved foods. Oh, I'm going to eat 5 sweet potatoes a day. Like there's
Right.
moderation in everything, and
Yeah.
everybody kind of has a different idea of like, okay, what does a paleo plate look like,
Mhm.
or what does a paleo food pyramid look like, or a keto
Right.
food pyramid?
Yeah. Okay, great. Good. And I know this is kind of a little off topic, but what are some of your favorite paleo cookbooks?
Okay, so let's see. One of the first people that I followed on Instagram years and years ago was Paleo MG,
Mhm.
Julie Bauer. She has some amazing recipes and
Mhm.
some amazing cookbooks. And then I like the Whole 30 cookbook as well. So it's not
Mhm.
necessarily just paleo, but it includes a lot of the same things.
Yeah, that one is really good.
Yes. And then there's some other, a lot of the people I've found through Instagram, and then I save a lot of their recipes, or I've ended up buying their cookbooks,
Yeah.
like Paleo Running Mama
Mhm.
and Erin Lives Whole. I don't think she's 100% paleo, but she does have a lot of great
Right.
paleo
Yeah, I think you're
recipes.
right. Mhm.
And then another one I actually have right here. Not necessarily paleo, but Kelly LeVeque
Mhm.
is one of my favorite people in the wellness space. She is all about blood sugar. I call her the blood sugar queen. Um, and she has two books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. And they have a lot of really wonderful whole food recipes that are all about blood sugar balance.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
Her thing is the Fab Four, which is
Mhm.
fat, fiber, protein, and greens.
Mhm.
So it's the balance of the macronutrients or the foods that can
Right.
help keep our blood sugar balance. And I love the way that she simplifies that approach. So it's not
Mhm.
like too complicated and there
Right.
aren't actually too
Overwhelming.
many. Yeah. And there aren't actually that many food rules along with it. It's more like a simple structure to follow with whatever foods you are incorporating.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. I'm always looking for new paleo cookbooks, and I love the Primal Gourmet. He just put out a new cookbook, and that one is amazing. If you haven't had that one
Whoa.
yet.
And not just, I want to try that. And that reminded me, Primal Blueprint, all of Mark Sisson's stuff is like
Mhm.
my go-to. He is an inspiration to me and so many in the paleo space.
Mhm.
And I love all of his recipes and cookbooks, and his company, Primal Kitchen, which actually was sold to Heinz, but they keep
Right.
the paleo approach, luckily, instead
Yeah.
of going back
Right.
to
Yeah.
normal
Keep our,
Heinz product.
right. Keep our fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, I think they have some. Yeah, I hope it doesn't change. But
Yeah.
I love all of their recipes, and all of their products are amazing
I
for
know their salad
spicing
dressing.
up a paleo
Mhm.
meal.
Yeah, totally. Okay, great. Now we got a little bit off topic, but that's really important too, because I know when you're shifting into a paleo lifestyle, the resources are so key, which I think is one of the fabulous things that you do, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. Okay,
Yeah, thank
so
you.
yeah, um, let's talk about inflammation, because I know that's a key part of paleo lifestyle. So how does it focus on reducing inflammation, that on that cellular aspect, and then how does that play a role in autoimmune disease? Because I know that's a big thing that you talked about before. And that's a really kind of not the whole part of the whole paleo, but it's a big niche of it. Like a lot of people will, there's a AIP, so they'll kind of like go into that aspect of it.
Yeah. So inflammation has been something that I've learned a lot about since my first hospitalization, because
Mm,
I didn't really ever think, I mean, I had been an athlete. Like, I thought of inflammation as like I sprained my ankle and I have acute inflammation there to heal the wound. But I
right.
never really thought about chronic or systemic inflammation until I
Hmm.
got sick, and I didn't necessarily get better. Like, I did have an acute illness. Like, I had acute inflammation in my small intestine, but then I had chronic issues for a really long time after that,
Yeah.
that I think was related to systemic inflammation, and my lab markers were definitely higher.
Hmm.
Um, so when I started eating paleo, and just by default, I started feeling a lot better. But part of that was because I was removing inflammatory foods.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, I mean, sugar we know is one of the most inflammatory foods.
Yeah, it's
But
like battery acid. I tell my
yeah,
patients it's like not
and
good for your system.
exactly. And a lot of that has to do with the blood sugar spikes and the insulin
Right.
spikes. And so sugar was a big one. And I forgot earlier when we were talking about the framework of paleo, is that
Hmm.
industrial seed oils are a big
Oh
thing
yeah.
to eliminate. So there has been so much misinformation around fats in the last 30 years.
Definitely.
However, then there's still a ton of controversy around there.
Hmm.
But industrial seed oils are inflammatory to the body for several reasons. And that's
Hmm.
another thing that is cut out on a paleo diet, which includes things like canola oil,
Ugh,
also known
worst
as
one.
rapeseed oil, or safflower oil, sunflower oil, any type of rancid quote unquote vegetable oil. It shouldn't even
Right.
be called vegetable oil. Um, and so that's another inflammatory food that is removed,
Hmm.
which people often feel so much better when they don't have that in their diet.
Hmm. It's amazing how
Uh,
just shifting a fat and oil can make such a difference because of your cholesterol. Like we need cholesterol to have healthy hormones.
yes, which the cholesterol, there is so much that I have learned in the last few years, especially with my own issues with inflammation, hormone imbalance, all my
Mm,
GI issues, discussions of whatever autoimmune disease I might have. And there's a lot of information out there. And I think,
yeah.
as confusing and as overwhelming as it can be, getting back to our roots and eating whole real foods, like what even, like, nobody knows what rapeseed oil is. Nobody knows
Mhm.
what even canola oil is. So if you get back to your roots and like just eat the simple real stuff like olive oil, avocado
Mhm.
oil,
Mhm.
coconut oil,
Mhm.
it makes a lot more sense, and it
Yeah.
simplifies it all.
Totally. Yeah, it's I like that aspect that you just said. Just, when you can come down to the roots of food, eating something that's a whole food. I always talk about things with patients about, when you're buying it on the shelf, like where is it on the shelf? What part of the aisle is it in the grocery store? What's around it? And when it comes to oils, that section is so huge, and having guidance about what oils to pick is so key. Because I think when I was at Whole Foods the other day, not to plug Whole Foods, but a health food store, I think the oil section was like 5 feet by like 8 feet, like this massive section.
That's what's really confusing about, I love Whole Foods, but at the same time, when they don't have it anymore because of COVID, but the hot bar is,
Mhm.
most of their foods had canola oil or safflower oil in them because
Mhm.
it's cheaper.
Right.
And that's where we as humans get like, it really hurts us because all
Mhm.
of these big companies are using ingredients that are as cheap as possible, and that's really hurting us.
Right. Not good for the cellular matrix of the body, right?
Right. And I think part of the inflammation, there's a lot of, because of all the controversy around it, from what I understand is one of the reasons why it's inflammatory is because of the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3
Mhm,
in our
exactly.
body. And
Mhm.
it's much different than it used to be. And it should be somewhat closer to a 1-to-1 ratio.
Mhm.
I know there's a lot of different numbers out there, but we have much higher ratio of omega sixes in our bodies now than we ever have. And I think that
Mhm.
that's a big contributor of inflammation, in addition to the oils just being oxidized and rancid and um, not not real. Like, what,
Right.
I don't even know what they are.
Yeah, you can Google on YouTube, or like go to YouTube and in the search, and like how canola oil is made. That's a great one to like totally shock your mind. You're like, okay, I'm never gonna eat canola oil again.
It's scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super scary. And so, okay, great. And what way did the paleo lifestyle really transform your life? I know you kind of touched about it a little bit, but I'd love for you to dive deeper into like how you talked about how you found it and how you kind of like, fell into it, I guess. But what
Yeah.
did you start to see that really transformed you? Like, oh my gosh, like, I think you said you were eliminating lots of things, but I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah. So after that initial infection and the terminal ileitis and that inflammation and all of the issues that I had from being on antibiotics from that and steroids, I
Mm-hmm.
was in a lot of pain. I
Mm-hmm.
had brain fog. I was having trouble sleeping. I had
Mm-hmm.
puffy weight gain that was
Mm-hmm.
like inflammatory weight gain. It didn't, so, I mean, I was exercising a ton as a college athlete, but I still had like puffy inflammatory
Mm-hmm.
weight on my body that was new to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, just the aches and pains. And I was like, not even 20 years old, which is not normal to have all kinds of
No.
chronic pain. And so when I started eating, basically when I found myself on a paleo diet, I
Mm-hmm.
had much less pain, if any at all. My brain felt much clearer. I didn't have that
Mm-hmm.
weird brain fog hanging over my head all day
Mm-hmm.
long to where I
Mm-hmm.
like couldn't even find words. And I wasn't as exhausted all the time. I think when you're eating inflammatory foods, you're just tired and lethargic. You don't
Mm-hmm.
want to exercise. You don't
Totally.
have that zest for life that you do when you feel healthy and good and light
Mm-hmm.
in your body.
Yeah.
And then the cravings, that's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it, I ended up having to work on blood sugar later, which when I was on a paleo approach initially, I was still eating higher carbohydrate, which
Mm-hmm.
my blood sugar balance, my blood sugar was still a little bit out of balance at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
until I started focusing on blood sugar balance in general, I still had cravings, but they were much less than when I was eating
That makes
processed
sense.
grains and
Mm-hmm.
white flours and white sugar and stuff.
Right.
Because I think the blood sugar swings just weren't nearly as severe, but they were still there because I wasn't properly pairing my foods, or I wasn't as aware of how to balance my blood sugar even with healthier foods in my diet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so everything from brain fog to pain to reduced cravings and feeling better in general, just being able to like having more stamina throughout the day and energy, all of
Mm-hmm.
those things kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
And then over time, it has gotten better and better and better, where it's like, I feel really good all day long. I don't need to rely on caffeine. I
Mm-hmm.
sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. I have steady mood, steady energy, no cravings. I don't get hangry. All of the things that make people feel like crap kind of go away when you start
Right.
eating foods that your body actually likes.
Yeah, it's like a total no-brainer, but then sometimes it's such a fight to get there, right?
It's hard, and I think, like, it didn't take me the whole 9 years, but it takes a while to find that peace and get over the
Mm,
hump of, like, not eating those
mhm.
processed junk foods that don't make you feel good.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people kind of have to hit rock bottom with health issues before they're like, "Whoa, I
Yeah.
cannot live like this anymore, and I have to make a change." But
Mhm.
both you and I, probably our goal is to help people make that change sooner before they get really sick.
Exactly. Right. It's all about prevention and wellness, not sickness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, great. So it sounds like that paleo lifestyle really helped you to notice the things that were going on. Cause I think a lot of times, you maybe you feel fatigued, but you can't quite put a name on it, right? Or you have brain fog, but you don't really notice it till it's gone. You're like, oh, I was really having, does that make sense? So it's like almost helped you to not label things, but to realize all the different elements that were going on and how much better you felt when you shifted things.
Exactly. And Dr. Mark Hyman is, do you know,
Mhm, mhm,
I love him. He's a functional medicine doctor, and he talks about FLC, feel like
mhm.
crap syndrome.
Yep,
And I think that's it. It's like you don't realize how crappy you feel until you feel good again. And then
totally.
you look back and you're like, wow, I could never live like that again,
Right,
which I
yeah.
could not. I
No.
absolutely could not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you feel that greatness, you're like, "Well, I'm never going back now." It's like you're addicted to
Exactly.
feeling good, which you should be.
Yeah, exactly. It's a much better way to be, much better thing to be addicted to. And then
Totally.
one of the last things that really made a big difference was, I don't know how many people are suffering with IBD or all of these chronic GI issues, but
Mhm.
just to be real, I had chronic diarrhea every single day, all day,
Mm.
with really horrible symptoms that included blood and pus and like scary
Oh
things,
gosh.
which
Yeah.
I think is kind of like awkward to talk about, but so many people are dealing with it that
Mhm.
I think, first of all, I don't want people to feel like they're alone. And second of all, food can make a huge difference with how you're digesting. I mean,
Mhm.
real food makes a huge difference with how your digestive process works. Whereas
Totally
when I
does.
was eating a bunch of inflammatory foods and my
Mhm.
GI tract was inflamed, there was a lot going wrong, and there was a lot of pain and discomfort and urgency. And it was scary because that
Mhm.
could send me back to the hospital again. So I had to figure that out in terms of like, working through my digestion and finding foods that I could actually process.
Yeah, wow, that's super powerful because I know that there are a lot of the listeners who have those same particular symptoms or issues, and because I work with a lot of patients with digestive disorders, and it's a super hard one because, it changes everything that you do. It like guides you like, well, I can't go out to, have fun with my friends because I might need a bathroom. There's not going to be one on the trail or, all these different things. It's like totally rules your life.
It rules your life. It changes everything. I remember I had my husband now, he was my boyfriend, and we hadn't been together for that long. And I would go on runs because I had always exercised a lot. And I would have
Mhm.
to call him in the middle of the run and be like, I need you to pick me up. Like, this is an emergency. And I couldn't make it home. Like, it was
Mhm.
so embarrassing and it's scary. And like, it makes you rethink just at such a young age, just like, how can your body kind of start falling apart like that? But
Mhm.
um, gut health is everything. So I think that that was a huge part of changing the way that I was eating.
Yeah, it's totally huge.
Yeah,
You regained your life back.
exactly. Yes.
Mhm. Okay, let's talk about how you work with your clients in a one-to-one aspect. Can you talk about what that looks like, how you guide your clients into a healthy lifestyle, and what kind of, some of the issues, or I don't like that word really, some of the things that are going wrong about
Yes.
why they would be coming in to see you.
Yeah. So when I first started health coaching, I was like, okay, I have spent so many years trying to figure out what is wrong with me, because conventional medicine saved my life several times. And we can
Hmm.
get into that, because I had that initial terminal ileitis infection that I needed steroids and antibiotics for.
Hmm.
And then I had a few other hospitalizations along the way and a
Hmm.
surgery. And then I had a brain abscess in 2016,
Oh,
which
wow.
was like the scariest part of it all.
Yeah.
And I totally would have died if I didn't have access to modern medicine and
Mm.
the surgery that they did, the antibiotics that I got. I had a PICC line for 4 months. Everything about that was like I needed that
Mhm.
emergency care.
Yeah.
But the long-term chronic symptoms, I was not getting any help from my conventional doctors. And in
Mhm.
fact, I was kind of being dismissed and told that it was either all in my head or they didn't really know what was wrong with me and it wasn't that big of a deal and I should just live with it and it's common, so it's normal. Like this whole misconception about like
Mhm.
things being so common that they become normal, just it
Right.
was so frustrating to me because all of these issues that I had as a young girl and a young woman was like, okay, maybe this is really common. It's way too common, but it's not normal and I don't want to feel like this.
Mhm.
But I wasn't given any help really in terms of like the chronic issues. And I went to over 30 specialists trying to figure out
Wow.
answers
Yeah.
and didn't really get all. I still don't have a diagnosis for like everything that has happened. I have
Mhm.
a few separate ones, but for a long
Right.
time there was talk of like, is this lupus? Is it Lyme disease? Is it Crohn's,
Right.
colitis? So many different things. So when I first started health coaching, I wanted to go into the niche of chronic mysterious illnesses
Mhm.
because that's kind of how I had identified in terms of like what my what my story was and what had happened to me. And I know that there are a lot of people suffering out there that are undiagnosed and feeling
Totally.
confused and lonely and
Mhm.
frustrated, and they've spent so much time and money trying to get answers
Right.
and they're not getting any. So a lot of people start to think like, is there something wrong with me or am I just making this up? Am I a drama queen?
Mhm.
um so that was my initial niche, and so a lot of my clients have had similar stories yet different to mine with all kinds of GI
Mhm.
issues, all kinds of hormonal imbalances, anxiety, depression, from all of the things that they've had to deal with,
Mhm.
and just kind of working through diet and lifestyle changes to get them to feel better. And then that's kind of, I have a 12-week program and I customize it to each client.
Mhm.
But a lot of my clients fall into that mysterious chronic illness niche where
Mhm.
it's like they just don't know how to eat for their body. They don't know how to live, like how to reduce stress, how to sleep more, what supplements to take, or what books to read, what podcasts to listen
Right.
to, like
Mhm.
how to find answers if they're not getting them from their PCP or whoever it is.
Mhm.
And then I also have been diagnosed with PCOS. And so hormone balance is something that I'm really passionate about because I struggled coming off the pill after like 10 years of being on it.
Mhm.
And a lot of women, so many women are struggling with hormonal imbalances.
Mhm.
So living and eating for hormone balance is really important, and figuring out how to balance your blood sugar and how to
Mhm.
reduce stress and not over exercise and supplement for your hormones and all of that. I also work with a handful of clients on. And then some of them are just like, I don't know how to eat to make myself feel good. Like I feel like crap all
Mhm.
the time. I
Mhm.
have cravings all day long. I'm on a roller coaster all day. I feel
Right.
super energized after I eat a really high carb and sugar meal, and then I crash, and then I want like some people just don't know how to eat because there's so much confusion around
Mhm.
um, what is healthy eating. Like some people are still stuck on the 90s like low fat situation,
With like
low
the
fat,
Atkins
high
diet
carb.
or something.
Yeah. So I kind of have been exploring a few different niches, but a lot of it is women's health in terms of gut health, hormone health,
Mhm.
and just helping people feel better through food and lifestyle changes that are
Mhm.
simple and sustainable.
That's great. Yeah, and it's so needed. I really liked how you talked about, there's a place for that emergency medicine and for conventional medicine. It's so needed. I would never want to not have it if I needed it, right? But at the
Yes.
same time, when it comes to chronic illness, especially autoimmune disease, they are clueless, right? It's like because they're
Yeah.
just not taught, and I can say this from, because I'm a physician and I am not like, trying to bark down their bad tree or something, but I
Yeah.
know that they're just not given the tools. Like it's just not, they're not taught the same tools. They get like, if you have A, you take B and that's it. And there's not another tool. But then as alternative health providers, we are given like this amazing alternative health toolbox, where we can see like, okay, this is going on. You can try all these other things. Let's do all these different types of testing to see how you're doing. Let's see how the food is affecting your body. I mean, it's just like a whole different concept. And I
Mhm.
think that we're really seeing that shift where people are now being aware, much more aware of like an alternative method can help them immediately feel better, as opposed to, like you said, like the journey of going through 30 doctors and specialists. That's just like so time consuming and, just, nightmare.
Yeah. And a lot of it is a lot of those specialists and everything that I was going to for a long time want to look for quick fix, band-aid options, band-aid
Exactly.
solutions of like, let's repress the symptoms, but we don't really know why. We don't know what, like, none of it was focusing on the root cause. And I think
Hmm.
that's why naturopathic doctors, functional medicine doctors, is like, there's so much to preventative medicine and root cause medicine and really figuring out the why, because then you can actually fix the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. So key.
Yeah.
And then, okay. So there's the 12-week program. And then I love another thing that you do that I'd love for you to talk about is the shopping with clients and how that can really help shift them, because, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed when you go to the store and you're trying, like, okay, I got my shopping list and I'm trying to eat these new foods. I don't even know what to buy. So how do you work with people with that, especially maybe now in the virtual aspect? It's a little different. Carry around their little phone and shop with you.
Yes, it's different because of COVID, of course, sadly, because the grocery store situation is just not the same anymore. I actually
Right.
used to love grocery shopping. Like, you could find me at Whole Foods for hours, but wearing a mask, and it's just such a weird dynamic now. So I'm not at the grocery store too much anymore. One thing that I do help my clients with is find online shopping options like apps. I really
Mm-hmm.
like the Prime Now app for
Mm-hmm.
Amazon or Whole Food, and there's other
Mm-hmm.
smaller options too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then for my clients, we do 1 hour weekly Zoom sessions for our main weekly sessions, but then I'm
Mm-hmm.
available through phone call or text basically throughout the entire week to just help them feel supported and
Mm-hmm.
answer questions that they have. So they're at the grocery store, text me a label, wondering about a new brand they found, asking questions, talking to
Mm-hmm.
them on the phone. I have gone with a few people to the store with masks on, but it's just not the same
The
as
same. Yeah, totally.
if we, yeah, and you can't really hear anything and you can't see their mouth moving. So there's like that communication barrier that's like a little
Right.
bit harder now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one of my session topics of the 12 weeks is understanding and deciphering food labels, which
Mm-hmm.
is such a hard, I mean, it's just really overstimulating and overwhelming to a lot of people. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so many different names for sugars and oils and all kinds of colors and dyes and ingredients. So really breaking that down and helping build confidence with, like, instead of talking about everything they shouldn't eat, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what we focus on is like, these are whole real foods that can be the bulk of your diet and provide you with every nutrient you need, and this is what we should focus on. So a lot of it is
Exactly.
like shopping in the right areas of the grocery
Right.
store.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a pretty comprehensive replace before you remove list that I have, like, old eats bread, and then they click on it and it's like new healthier alternatives for homemade bread recipes or
Mm.
healthy brands. Like, luckily in the last 10 years there are so many wonderful brands that are focused on health and longevity.
Mm-hmm.
So they have either had their own stories with chronic illness and realized that they needed to eat healthy in order to stay alive and to
Yeah.
thrive. So foods like Siete, brands like Siete Foods
Oh, I
brands.
love those. That's so my
So
favorite. I'm a
good. The
totally addicted.
tortillas.
Yeah, I'm so
Yes,
addicted. I could not live without them.
I love Siete. All things taco, Mexico food, like
Yeah.
Mexican food. it makes such a big difference for Taco
Hmm.
Tuesday night and
Yeah, Taco
everything.
Tuesday.
Yes. And then, so yeah, Siete Foods,
Hmm.
Primal Kitchen,
Yep.
Birch Vendors has all kinds of
Hmm.
like super simple ingredient paleo pancakes, and um, Purely Elizabeth has a lot of
Hmm.
grain-free products.
Hmm.
There's so many products that have that little, Nut Pods is one of my favorite
Oh, nut
dairy-free
pods. Oh my God.
creamers.
Yeah. I'm, yes, also addicted to those.
Yes, I share a lot of this on my Instagram because I get really excited about, I don't think people need to like buy tons of boxed paleo foods. I think the bulk of their diet should come from like
Yes.
real food, like real food that you get in the produce aisle. But these are just real food ingredients that are put into a box for easy access for us
Hmm.
busy people that like maybe don't have time to home make some of those things. And
Right.
so I find that a lot of those brands make healthier eating more accessible and
Yeah.
more
Easier.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally more exciting. Yeah. Totally. That totally makes sense. Um,
Yes.
Okay, great. So I love that, you talk about the combination of having whole foods are super important, but in our busy lifestyles, it's great to have those healthy foods that you can, like a tortilla, like you said with a siete, something that you can use to implement is so key.
Yes, it makes a big difference
Hmm.
also just in terms of like making some things exciting again. Like I think everybody should be eating more vegetables and more fruits and all
Hmm.
kinds of whole foods, but like if you miss pancakes, you can still have a really delicious grain-free, sugar-free, dairy-free pancake that tastes amazing but
Hmm.
won't cause a blood sugar spike, won't
Totally.
trigger inflammation or GI issues. So I think it's like having exciting options available just makes it less daunting to feel like you're going to have to eat broccoli for the rest of your life. Like it's really not, it's not as if you look at my Instagram, like I am obsessed with making healthy eating exciting and
Hmm.
fun and beautiful. So that's just part of my passion because a lot of people think um, eating healthier has to be boring, and it really doesn't have to be.
No, it should be fun. Otherwise, you're not going to want to stick to it, right? Like be
Yes.
compliant with it and have fun with it. Yeah, and that's one thing I love about your Instagram is that, you can tell you're having fun with it, which is so key to health. It's like not just um I don't know. If you're doing something like making a shift in your lifestyle, that's what actually was going to be my next question. How do you work with your clients on helping to make it stick? So like that's a good segue, because I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, of course, if you feel better, like that's going to help, but do you have some like key tips to helping make lifestyle changes really stick?
Yes, a lot. I do think a lot of it is driving with how they feel.
Hmm.
So that is a huge motivating factor. But then another part is focusing on building habits and making them easy and accessible and sustainable,
Hmm.
and taking the work, like taking the obstacles out of the way of building those new habits. So, like, there's a lot of different resources out there on how to build new habits, but a lot of what we do is focus on building new habits instead of having to um, remove or cancel old bad habits. Because a
Hmm.
lot of times when you focus on building new habits, the old quote unquote bad habits just kind of fall away because you don't
Right.
have room or time for them anymore.
Hmm.
So having a positive approach on like, this is what we're doing because it feels good, it makes us feel good, it's exciting. I have like positive thoughts around it, makes it much easier than like, okay, you can't eat popcorn anymore, you can't have cake anymore, you can't drink anymore, and like just make it like turning it to a positive, uh putting like a positive spin on it makes it a
Hmm.
lot easier and more exciting.
Hmm.
But then also a big part of that, like you mentioned, is making it enjoyable. If
Totally.
somebody is eating like, all the the meal prepping stuff from maybe the last, I think maybe it was like 5 to 10 years ago, where everybody was meal prepping like chicken, brown rice, and broccoli, and kind of eating these really redundant, boring meals.
Right. That was the healthy meal, right? Quote
Yes,
unquote. Right.
yes. So a lot of what we work on is making like colorful, beautiful plates of a variety of foods, as much variety as possible within the framework of like the foods that make that person feel their best. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody has a little bit different, um, everybody has to eat a little bit differently depending on their own issues. And some people, some people can't
Mm-hmm.
do nuts, and some people
Right.
can do that organic full fat dairy. So kind of trying to spice things up and having as much variety as possible and make it exciting, but
Mm-hmm.
also building the habits so that it's easy, because if it's not easy,
Right.
it's not going to be sustainable. And
Totally.
then giving them tips and tricks to eat out and get stuff at the grocery store and go on trips and still enjoy it. Because if they don't have tips and tricks to be able to handle those times, it's also not going to last, because they're going to feel like they failed, and then they like
Mm.
fell off the wagon, and then they just have to eat unhealthy again because they don't know how to transition back to eating the foods that make them feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So,
key. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I like how you talked about um, having it be a part of your lifestyle that is fun, because if you're, going, well, we're not spending as much time with our family members, maybe traveling as much as we were this year, but when you want to be able to enjoy it, if you're going to be, let's just like a holiday meal or something like that. And I'd love for you to talk about sugar a little bit more. And do you have some tips for like blood sugar regulation or recipes on your Instagram that people can, your favorite ones where they can look up and see? Because I think that's really a great place for people to have that nurturing aspect of food. It's like the comfort food, the memory of that recipe. Like, oh yeah, like you mentioned earlier, that piece of candy or that cookie. So do you have some favorites that you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I like to do a lot of remakes of maybe unhealthy foods that we ate growing up. So
Uh-huh.
I do have a lot of those shared on my Instagram, and I do. I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I started using this brand or this company called Levels, and I was
Mm-hmm.
beta testing for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been really eye opening, because over the last few years, I've been really focusing on blood sugar balance. But now I have the data. So, like, every
Mm,
time I eat, I can watch what is happening with my blood sugar throughout the day.
mm,
And it's continuous. So it's not like I'm having to, it's not like I'm missing different parts of the day because I forgot to prick myself 2 hours after a meal. I
right.
kind of have that continuous data every single day. So it's been
Right.
really fun to experiment with different foods. And some
Mm-hmm.
of the main findings I've had for blood sugar balance are preloading with fat and protein is huge.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So, yeah, say you're eating a meal and you have sweet potatoes, chicken, vegetables, um, and you eat the sweet potatoes first.
Mm-hmm.
There's research to say that your blood sugar, you'll have a higher glucose spike because you ate the
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrates first.
Right.
Whereas if you ate avocado or olive oil and chicken first, that fat and protein will slow the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
So, a few things that have really helped me is preloading with fat and fiber. So anytime I eat, I always have, or fat and protein, I always have some fat and protein first,
Mm-hmm.
including fiber. And
Mm-hmm.
then if I am going to have something like fruit or something a little bit sweeter or a healthier treat, even
Mm-hmm.
with like raw honey or maple syrup or coconut sugar, I
Mm-hmm.
always have that after I've
Mm-hmm.
had a balanced meal with fat, protein, and fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And then some things, I think this depends on the person and everybody's a little bit different on what they, has a different opinion what they want to include. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think like a organic whole stevia or monk fruit can be part of a healthy diet, because
Mm-hmm.
it helps with blood sugar regulation, and it doesn't have an effect on blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a nice way to incorporate healthier treats without having an effect on your glucose levels.
Mm-hmm.
And then some other things like walking before or after meals. There's a lot of research to say that that
Mm-hmm.
helps curb spikes or just balance blood sugar in general. So that helps me a lot. And then even I didn't know this, but drinking a lot of water with a higher carbohydrate meal can spike your blood sugar higher than it would without drinking a lot of water during that meal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of fun tricks that I've learned through using the glucose monitor and also reading a lot of the studies that they have through the app and
Mm-hmm.
other research that I've looked into. And then there's a few other tips and tricks like apple cider vinegar before a meal with carbohydrates can help.
Boost
Everybody
metabolism.
has, yeah, and everybody has a different response, but to certain foods. But for myself, I noticed that I do better on like a lower carbohydrate diet than I used to be on, but I still can include healthy carbohydrates when I'm eating healthy fat and protein and fiber with it. And my blood sugar stays stable and my energy is stable. I don't have cravings. It just feels so good to have stable blood sugar throughout the day. Being on a roller coaster is like, you just don't realize how good you feel until you're off that roller coaster.
Yeah, so much more balanced, right, throughout the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
then
so, sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And so a lot of my recipes, I actually share on my stories, my glucose response, which everybody's a little bit different, but there are these general rules that most people fall into the same category of like, I made these I was thinking of Christmas treats like coming up, holiday treats.
Yeah.
And I made these paleo pecan sandies.
Oh, I saw those on your Instagram. I was like, I got to make those this weekend.
They're so good. And so I actually used the Lakanto brand monk fruit powdered sugar, but you can also make a powdered sugar from coconut sugar with a little bit of tapioca starch. Or not even, you can just blend it up and it basically makes a powdered sugar. So there's so many ways to healthify little cookies and treats and brownies and pancakes. And then I also I try to share a lot of simple lunch and dinner and breakfast meals. I like bowls. I feel like they're an easy way to throw a bunch of nutrients and color and variety in there and make it exciting with a good sauce.
Right. Yeah, totally. And easy and simple. Yes. That's what I like about them too. It's like, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, bowl. I can always, have that be ready in like 10 minutes or something.
Yes. It's always such a good option.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, great. Good. And so ways that people can find you. So your website, Maddie?
Yeah. So everything is Mad Healthy, MADD Healthy. My Instagram is at mad.healthy because that username was taken without the dot in between. So MADD.healthy. And then my website is just madhealthy.com.
Great.
And to find me, they can just DM me on Instagram at mad.healthy, or there's a link in my profile and Linktree for a free consultation, or any of my links, like my website is on there as well. Or if they just go directly to my website, there's a consultation tab if they just want to talk. Anybody can reach out there or through my email. There's an email button on my Instagram or my website.
Perfect. Oh, great. Lots of ways to find you and connect. I love it. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Maddie. It's been so fun to talk about paleo lifestyle and hear how you can make changes, and I like how you simplified it, and because I think that when people want to make a shift in especially when it comes to lifestyle and nutrition, it seems really daunting. And I loved how you broke it down and made it seem fun and easy.
Thank you. It is fun and easy, and I promise it's sustainable. I see stuff all the time that's like, diets don't work, paleo doesn't work, keto doesn't work. And I've been eating paleo for 9 years and I couldn't feel better. So I want people to know that it's possible, and it doesn't have to be a strict dogmatic diet. It can be something that makes them feel better and brings joy to their life, and it lasts.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. One last fun question. If you had a unlimited budget right now, what would you do with the money to make the biggest, largest impact on the planet, to change the health of the planet?
This is actually give everybody a continuous glucose monitor.
Oh, that's a great idea.
If everybody had the data of what was happening in their body, that knowledge is power, and they would be able to see, wow, every time I eat that bagel for breakfast, my blood sugar spikes like crazy and the rest of the day is horrible. But if I eat eggs or protein or, healthy fats at breakfast, my blood sugar is stable for the rest of the day. It would be such a good visual for people to see what is happening in their body after they're eating certain foods. And I think metabolic health is really important right now.
Totally.
So I would give everybody a continual glucose monitor. I think everybody would benefit from that. Blood sugar balance is so important, and it's so much more than just the glucose. I think so much happens after you eat the sugar and it goes into your
Mhm.
body. There's so
Right.
much
So many
damage
more
that can
levels.
happen there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a great idea. And what did you say the name Levels? Is that what you said it was?
Level. So I have been beta testing for them. I don't get paid. I reached out to them and I asked if I could try it. And so I
Mhm.
got like a small discount for myself, but I still paid for the entire thing. And so
Mhm.
I truly, authentically just love it. And I
Mhm.
want everybody to know that it can help make their life better because it's just so empowering to have the data. I
Mhm.
actually, several months before that, I had asked my PCP if I could get one because I have PCOS and I thought that it
Mhm.
would be helpful for insulin resistance and
Right.
other hormone related balance. And she told me that she said, no, it's too much data to have on your body. And I
What?
felt a little bit mad when she said that because I was like, my body, I should be able to see, like, I deserve to have the data on my body. Like, knowledge is power, health is
Yeah.
wealth. Why don't I deserve to have that just because I'm not? Like, it just seemed like a weird, silly response. So, this company actually allows you, as long as you don't have, they're still working through the legal stuff in terms of having diabetics and people that are actually diagnosed with
Mhm.
and on
Diabetes.
medication.
Mhm. Mhm.
But for like most people can get this, and I think it's really helpful and um, it's so beneficial to see that data.
Great. Cool. Thanks. I'm going to check that out and I'll put it in the show notes so people can investigate it on their own too. Okay.
Yeah, sounds
Thanks,
good.
Maddie. Happy
Thank
holidays to
you.
you. And
You
I
too.
look forward to connecting more with you on Instagram, seeing all the great stuff you're cooking up.
Me too. Thank you so much.